This is Kanzenshuu, the podcast, episode 441 for the week of April 29th, 2018. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Kanzenshuu,
the podcast,
an extension of the all-encompassing Tongpoo fan site.
Kanzenshuu?
We cover anything and everything. Dragon Boy, the Adventure of Tongpoo, in hopes of enlightening and a little bit of entertaining. We're going right into part 2 of it because why the heck not? We've basically is one of the only things that at least I've been working on the last couple weeks. Figure we'll just knock it all out here. My name is Mike Vegito EX. Joining me once again, it's Julian. Hello, sir.
Hello.
We have one more part and then we're done. We're wrapping up a project. This is unprecedented for us. How quickly we brought this together.
I know, right? That reminds me too. After we were finishing recording last time, it occurred to me that I completely neglected to mention something else that Toriyama did for Fresh Jump, and that was his How to Draw comics series that he did with Akira Sakuma.
Yeah.
It was like 13 parts, and it's the Hetapi Manga Kengyujo, which is the lousy comics laboratory or crappy manga lab, if you prefer.
Right. I think most of us know that as its collected release.
Yes, but that originally ran in Fresh Jump, and I think when it ended, they realized there wasn't quite enough, so Sakuma did a bunch more without Toriyama's involvement, but it was originally a collaboration there.
And who resurrected that many, many years later? Wasn't there a redo on that?
I think it was Yusuke Murata.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think it's Hetapi Manga Kenkyujo R or something like that. That was back when he was doing the football one.
Was that iShield? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. A little follow-up to what we talked about last time. Fresh Jump not going to be a part of this podcast episode. So if you want to know all about Fresh Jump and what was published there, dive back to the previous episode. What we're going to be doing this episode, this is the second and final in a 2-part series, what we're calling Dragon Ball Prototypes. Last time on the show, we talked some of the ideas that Toriyama was using in Dr. Slump that would get reused in Dragon Ball. And then we went right into Dragon Boy, a 2-part series that was published in Fresh Jump and served as one of the real transition points, the source for formulating new ideas that would turn into a new series. But along the way, it wasn't just Dragon Boy. Toriyama did one more, I hesitate to call it a series. It is just a single one-shot this time around, single complete beginning to end 45-page one-shot in a single publication. That's the Adventure of Tongpoo. We're going to talk about that this episode, and then we're going to chat up the actual drafts, the manuscripts that would become Dragon Ball proper. So not just a one-shot along the way, but the things that actually turned into the series that folks would be reading later in 1984. That's what's on tap this episode. We got plenty to chat about, so we're going to jump right into it. Here we go. So Julian, like we talked about, Dragon Boy was a 2-part series that was published in Fresh Jump, and then it turned into monthly Fresh Jump, kind of in between its chapters. The Adventure of Tongpoo, we will talk about the title of it, but for now we'll just refer to it as The Adventure of Tongpoo. Where was this published and when?
So this one was published in the main weekly Shonen Jump. It was the 1983 number 52 issue, which was the last issue of publication year 1983, but in fact it was published on the 29th of November. So it's always the first few issues of the publication year actually are still in the previous year. It's one of those quirks of Jump. This is the last issue of publication year 1983, and it's very much sort of those near the end of the year one-shots that you sometimes get. Could be testing the waters for something.
The cool thing about this is that since it's published in Weekly Shonen Jump, it's not an approximate, like 2 days earlier, there was a chapter of Dr. Slump. There was an actual chapter of Dr. Slump alongside this in Weekly Shonen Jump. This is chapter 199. And like we were talking about last time, Toriyama will be wrapping up in basically 40 chapters at this point, fewer than 40 chapters. Chapter 236 is going to be it the following August. So we have under a year before the end of Dr. Slump.
That is right. And at this point, he starts getting into actually more and more Chinese things that he likes to slip in. He does visit China during the last couple months of the serial. And he reports on going to China and coming back. And he has a title page where Arare is wearing a Mao suit and greeting the reader in Chinese. But it's interesting to see that kind of progression as he's clearly ramping up for what's coming after.
I feel like if you're reading the stars correctly, you can see where you're going at this point. I wonder how many people, just the casual fans reading Jump at the time, knew what they were reading at this point, kind of piecing it all together. What do you think? Would it be clear at that time, or would you just be completely oblivious to it?
I think people might not have known. I mean, I think they could tell that it was heading somewhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, in some ways, you have these arcs that are wrapping up. You have the 10 years later thing where it's basically revealed that who's going to be with whom, which is pretty obvious even if you're just reading the series. But it's basically another opportunity for Toriyama to make a jab at himself because 10 years later, in the far-off year of 1994, he is a homeless beggar, which the actual Toriyama is definitely not in 1994. But of course, he had no way of knowing.
He will be even more rich that 10 years later. And he'll be getting ready to wrap up the next one at that point, honestly.
Right?
All right, well, let's just get on into it. Like we say, we like to do these manga review of awesomeness style. We'll give you a recap of the chapter. This one's a little longer. Tongpoo is a full 45 pages. And then we'll get into all sorts of artwork critique and story and writing critique, all the good stuff. So Tongpoo begins here. Planet 12, it's not actually a planet. It is the 12th ship sent out to investigate alien planets. This ship is drifting through space with its sole crew member, Tongpoo. Tongpoo is awoken from his sleep chamber, and after some incidents washing up and using a butt cleaning device that appears to take up far more mass area in his spaceship than it probably should. Classic Toriyama joke there. He gets on with his mission of checking out this new alien planet. Only problem is that there's no planet around and the ship's emergency warning is going off. Tongpoo uses the computer system to find out that engine number 2 is damaged and the ship is set to explode in under a minute. So Tongpoo scrambles to get his scout ship and he escapes just in time. He figures he'll have to just keep flying until he runs out of fuel and then swim the rest of the way, if he can even swim in space. Although if you're paying close attention, the breathing in space thing, this is important. This will come up again later in the series. I say series, later in the one-shot. So Tongpoo spots a planet close by and lands to find it mostly covered by water, but with a few islands and decent air quality. He boils up some water and drops in his number 12 capsule to produce a hover bike. He comes across a wrecked spaceship and swims inside to check it out, only to discover it is actually Planet 8, a ship that left 2 years before his. He figures the 3 crew members must have landed here and had trouble. He stumbles across one dead pilot who clearly had been shot through the chest, so Tongpoo readies his own pistol. Peeking over a rock, Tongpoo spots a girl taking a bath. After briefly scouting each other out, the girl asks Tongpoo if he knows how to use a machine gun that she has nearby. He politely explains how to use it, only to have her turn around and fire on him with said machine gun. Tongpoo tries to reason with her, explaining he is also a human. He proves it by answering that the tallest mountain on Earth is Mount Everest. Settling down, the two chat out how the 3 crew members arrived, but 2 days later, an alien spaceship also arrived, and the alien who emerged killed the other 2. The girl says she hid the whole time, which is the only reason she is still alive, but she's been struggling ever since. Tongpoo decides to bring the girl, named Plamo, back to his house. From here on out, I'm going to say Plamo, and we'll get to the names a little bit later on. Plamo doesn't see a house, though. Tongpoo says she must not know about capsules, and uses number 4 to produce a full house. Plamo digs into a box lunch while Tongpoo is satisfied with his rather gross drink. Plamo has no idea where this planet even is, so Tongpoo wonders why she was selected for this research in the first place. She takes out a spoon to show her supernatural powers, and an hour later, the spoon has indeed bent a tiny little bit. Plamo wonders why Tongpoo himself was chosen, to which he answers that she will see. After a failed attempt at washing up together, Plamo busts out a sexy dress that she says is part of her secret awesome mega plan to distract the alien and steal their spaceship. Tongpoo wonders if aliens would even care about her looks. As the planet's sun rises and wakes up its inhabitants, Tongpoo and Plamo take off on the hoverbike in search of the alien and its spaceship. They spot the ship in the distance, and when it seems like the alien is nowhere to be seen, Tongpoo rushes in. He peeks around, trying to figure out the layout of the ship, while Plamo makes her way inside as well. Tongpoo finds the control room and decides he'll bomb the spaceship from the fuel room. While he doesn't have a bomb, he does have a grenade. He runs back to the ship's kitchen, grabs some ice, and creates a makeshift time bomb. When the ice melts, the grenade latch between the two cubes will open and detonate. Tongpoo rushes out only to find Plamo captured by the alien. Tongpoo goes to fire his pistol, but the alien shoots a much larger gun right through Tongpoo. The alien attempts to eat Plamo, but she somehow manages to get free. Tongpoo is suddenly back on his feet, even with a hole through him. The alien keeps on firing at Tongpoo, but he is a cyborg. Completely angry now, Tongpoo unleashes on the alien, knocking him out with a couple swift punches. It is just then that Tongpoo remembers the grenade, which is about to explode, so he grabs Plamo, who is distracted and smacking the unconscious alien with a stick, and runs away just in time. Back at the capsule house, Tongpoo and Plamo try to figure out what to do next. With only the tiny little scout ship, they'll never make it back to Earth, so they'll have to look for another nearby planet. Tongpoo says the ship is only made for one person, but Plamo knows exactly how to handle that. With Tongpoo hanging on for dear life atop the ship, Plamo flies off in search of another planet. Their adventures are only just beginning. So Julian, let's start at the beginning, which is the title of this. Again, I keep wanting to say series. It's not a series. It's a one-shot. I'm not used to this. Tongpoo Daiboken, except that's not what it's written as in English over there.
Yes, so it's literally got the English title on there of The Adventure of Tongpoo, but literally it translates to Tongpoo's Great Adventure.
It definitely feels like a Kami to Kami, Battle of Gods kind of thing, where it's like it's in the ballpark.
It's in the ballpark. It's not exactly the same, but you kind of get the idea.
So last time we talked about where Toriyama was, some of the previous one-shots he had done. We're not going to repeat a lot of that information. Same thing where we talked about where he is in Dr. Slump already. So let's just jump into a couple key Dragon Ball comparisons here. Tongpoo is a little different from Dragon Boy, where it's not so much the Chinese aesthetic, although it just feels like a space version of that exact same story, right?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of similarities there to the point where it's like, yeah, we can definitely tell where this came from.
What's really funny to me is that we're going off to space here in Tongpoo. That's something that Dragon Ball's not going to do for quite some period of time. But it seems like Toriyama's already here in 83 is kind of knocking around these ideas. I want to do a Chinese story. I want to do a sci-fi story. I want to do a kung fu story. How can I just mash this all together? And it seems like he separated them out for a little bit between Dragon Ball and Tongpoo, and even Dragon Ball, not so much at the beginning, but eventually it got there. And these stories certainly laid the groundwork for it. I want to talk about the design of Tongpoo, but I guess we should talk about his name first. How do you want to explain this name?
Tongpoo's name is actually written in katakana, which is a phonetic script usually reserved for things like foreign words and names. But in this case, it seems to be based on actually a Chinese word written with the characters for east and wind, which I'm probably going to butcher this, but would in Chinese be something like Dongfang. And again, it literally means east wind or metaphorically winds of change. And this has been used in Japan before, but it's particularly been used as the song title on the self-titled debut album for Yellow Magic Orchestra, which Toriyama has previously noted that he liked. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that that particular song title was romanized exactly in the spelling as the character's name in this one shot. So I think it's pretty likely that's where he got the name from.
Right. Now, that interview was 1980, I think it was?
80, I think, yeah.
And with this album being 78, and Tongpoo, I guess we can say not just written in the title, but actually in our alphabet within the art of the chapter itself. We can't concretely say that Toriyama got the name from Yellow Magic Orchestra. Probably influenced him in some way.
So without a definite word from the author, we can't say for sure, but it seems pretty likely.
I want to talk about his design real briefly because it's cute. He's got his goggles, he's got this little satchel thing, he's got his pistol. I look at it and I go, oh my god, that is the hero character from Dragon Quest II. Just swap out the pistol for a sword and a shield and you essentially have the same character. He's got the goggles, he's got the pullover helmet with the little ear things on the side. It's got the satchel, the way the belt is. Dragon Quest II won't be out for another few years, 2 or 3 years at this point. I look at it and go, man, you really are just drawing the same thing over and over. And sure enough, Dragon Quest III's main character looks a lot like Gohan.
Yep.
Lots of Dragon Quest comparisons to make, but we'll jump away there. We're going to do the Dragon Ball comparisons here. I feel like Tongpoo does, whereas Dragon Boy, they felt more like, I'm going to use this in a different way, like the Dragon Balls. I mean, that was a dragon jewel that gave you an actual dragon that kind of did nothing. Over here in Tongpoo, we have capsules. We have a capsule house. We have them going inside the house. We have Plamo firing on Tongpoo. It's just like these exact same situations are happening the exact same ways in Dragon Ball. And in that way, I feel like Tongpoo serves even more of a prototype, at least for the early chapters of Dragon Ball as is. I feel like Dragon Ball kind of set the overall kind of story and mission and goal, whereas Tongpoo kind of serves up these panel framings that are going to be carried over as is.
Exactly. So there's a lot that's very similar here. So where do we want to start in explaining each one?
Oh, geez. Let's start with the capsules. These are the Iro capsules. The old Scanlation translated this as variety capsules. Like you and I were trying to talk about, like, is there a better way to describe this? That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's good enough. I'm not doing this professionally, so yeah, we'll go with that.
You were saying something like anything goes or whatever you want capsules, something like that.
Yeah, or whatever. Lots of different things. So, so they have the ability to house a variety of items, as you might suspect. And, their method of getting them to open up is a bit more involved, since you have to boil water. But they're definitely a clear precursor, or a prototype, if you will, for the Hoi Poi capsules of Dragon Ball.
I wonder if he looked at the boiling them in water and said, why would I handicap myself that way? It's so much easier to just throw them. And that allowed him to do something. Isn't this something that Toriyama really latched onto early, was Toriyama's ability to do even the English language kind of onomatopoeia for things?
Oh, the lettering. Yeah, that was literally why he called Toriyama out of the blue. Is like, ooh, he saw the lettering. It wasn't the actual story itself, which happened to be a Star Wars parody. No, it was the sound effect.
I feel like that gives Toriyama just a great excuse to do that. And Toriyama's really, yeah, do that. Yeah, you're really good at that. Someone take away this handicap for yourself. But this gives us the situation of going into the house. I mean, everything about creating the house, going into the house, the sitting down and having your drink and having your meal, and it's just that exact same scene from Dragon Ball.
Yeah, they even have an exchange where one comments on how disgusting the other's food is.
I guess jumping back a little earlier too, the setup is a little different. I think it's funnier in Tongpoo than it is in Dragon Ball, where she jumps out and just starts shooting at him. I love the exchange of, can you tell me how this machine gun works? Oh, thank you. And then she fires on him. I think that is hysterical. But I mean, overall, it's girl comes across boy, fires gun at boy, who is able to dodge/take the attack, and they work out what they need to do.
Right. It also reminds me of the scene later on in I think it's chapter 4 of Dragon Ball, after they get back to the capsule house from helping the turtle get back to the sea. Mm-hmm. And that Bulma is obviously a lot angrier at Goku for reasons that Goku is unable to fathom, because he's Goku. But that's a very similar pose to the way that Puramo shoots at Tongpoo.
I guess since we're talking about her, let's talk about her name a little bit. I look at it, and the first thing that came to mind for me was, oh, maybe it's a play on plum. Maybe he's already getting into the food or just rearranging syllables kind of thing. I think far more likely is he's just naming a character for a thing he likes to do.
Yep, so he's very into plastic modeling. So, Puramo deru. Plastic model, Puramo. It's literally just the abbreviation that's used in Japan, because Japan loves to clip everything down to 3 or 4 syllables, and this is one of them.
Yeah.
And so he just used that as is.
I don't think there's a confirmation on that you and I have read, but I mean, it just is. And everything he talks about year in, year out is he likes to do
plastic
the models. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, there's no confirmation, but it's pretty obvious.
So between Tongpoo and Plamo here, we don't have a confirmation, but we're 99.8% sure at this point.
Right.
Now, the only other real character in this chapter is the alien, and we talked about this last time. Toriyama is even more directly just stealing the xenomorph race design from Alien here, because it's an actual alien this time as opposed to a robot. But we have that elongated head thing going on. We get a big tail. It's kind of buff, but other than that, it's just that design.
Right, and he's had monsters and aliens that look like this in Dr. Slump, too, so he's no stranger to this design. He's even drawn himself as a xenomorph at one point.
Right, you mentioned that last time. I mean, we pointed out, but it almost doesn't need to be pointed out because he's done it before, he's doing it now, and he'll do it again at least 2 more times in Dragon Ball after this. But something that you wrote about in an article that we did in our 30th anniversary magazine, I love this. It's a very specific pose, a very specific paneling. It's just a character or 2 characters on top of a hover bike thing, just the exact framing of the panel, the angle of them, the way they're driving forward. It was done in pink. It's done here in Tongpoo. It's going to be done again in Dragon Ball with Yamcha. It's just, man, there's something you like about drawing characters that way and just getting that motion on the page.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like he was just sort of looking at it like, ooh, I can use this again. It's hard to say for sure, because sometimes he does things without realizing it, and sometimes he does it deliberately. But the sheer similarity makes it seem like maybe he was using it as a visual reference.
Yeah. Let's talk about the alien here, and maybe even some of the fights in Dragon Boy, and then some of the fights in Dragon Ball, maybe with the pterodon and the bandit bear. There's a lot of similarities between the situations and even the choreography here.
So you have, again, so the pose where the alien is holding Puramo, I don't want to say hostage because it's not really like a hostage situation.
Right.
But the way that the Pteranodon grabs Bulma and is just holding there while Goku is sort of looking, Goku is looking sort of in bewilderment while Tongpoo actually understands the gravity of the situation. But that's very similar. And then when the hero actually jumps into action to do something about the alien, I feel like Toriyama reuses a lot of the same choreography in the fight against the bandit bear in the 3rd chapter of Dragon Ball.
The nice thing here is that I feel like the angles are a little bit different. Like for Tongpoo, the follow through you see Tongpoo coming towards you, as opposed to in Dragon Ball where Goku is punching away from himself into the bear's eye. But overall, they're kind of like flipping onto their opponent and hitting them into the face. Here, at least, I think it's nice that Toriyama he's copying the choreography, but he's not copying the paneling. So with that in mind, I guess let's talk about the art in Tongpoo a little bit. It's tough because you want to separate it out because, all right, we've had Dr. Slump, that's going to still be going. We've had 2 chapters of Dragon Ball. Here we have Tongpoo. Tongpoo was just later that same year. So there's not even a year in between here. Are you seeing any kind of differentiation between what he did in Dragon Ball and what he's doing here in Tongpoo? Is the sci-fi setting giving you anything different?
Yeah, well, the sci-fi setting definitely has some differences. However, I would say the characters are in many ways similar to what came before. He's definitely sort of playing with character tropes, character ideas, and I think it's pretty clear at this point that he's going to have a male and a female lead interacting with each other.
For sure,
in his next series. Very similar ways, too. So he's refining his ideas. He's getting more to the point. I mean, it's still a little unclear. Tongpoo is a bit more worldly wise than even Tangtong from Dragon Boy. And Puramo is actually, I think, a little bit more innocent and not stuck up the way that the princess and later Bulma tend to be. Mm-hmm. But they embody many similar traits.
I think this is relevant here. Julian, what is Toriyama's comment from this chapter in Weekly Shonen Jump, that exact issue?
So again, he had a Dr. Slump chapter in this issue, but he doesn't comment on it. Instead, he uses his author comment to talk directly about this one shot. And he says, 読み切りの直しが3回もだから時間がきつきつ。出来はどうだった? So I had to revise this one shot 3 whole times, so I was really tight on time. how'd it turn out?
The reason why I say that's relevant here is I feel like the art in Tongpoo, it's so clean, it's so refined. Everything about it is so perfectly styled for that point in time. I feel like it looks better than it has any right to.
Yeah, and clearly it seems like he's really trying to refine his ideas. Again, to revise it 3 times, it's not typical of Toriyama.
Right. This is someone who will hold on to it to the last second. So when he delivers the manuscript, oh, there's no time, we can't revise anything.
Right. So if given the option, he would much prefer to keep it as close to the original version as possible. So the fact that he was made or worked to the effort that he did to revise it that many times shows he's really, really trying to make his ideas clearer.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with him trying to find an angle to work with for his next series. And again, I think even though this is a sci-fi setting, he's really playing with like the martial arts kind of choreography with Tongpoo and the way he fights.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a gun, but he mostly does it barehanded.
Let's talk about some of those standout panels there. I mean, I feel like it should have been a full page, but when he breaks out of his clothing and he's got that one fist up in the air, he's like, is that where he says I'm a cyborg?
No, he says Power Zenkai, like full power, max power.
That is such a great looking panel. The look on his face, everything about it is perfect. I feel like that deserves a full page. The next page we're going to get, it's like 2/3 of a page of the punch. The action looks great. There's not a lot of it. The punch up into the alien reminds me a lot of that one fist, kind of like not even paying attention, fist up in the air. That's such a cool look to him. Like, yeah, right. I got this.
It's just his nonchalant reaction to getting shot. Like, right. Oh no, my belly button's huge now. I can't go to the bathhouse like this. Aliens, what are you? Like, I'm a cyborg. No, I'm really angry. And he just goes into action.
I want to call out some of the other panels too. I'm looking at one here. It's Plamo. It's kind of like this flashback scene where she's thinking back on arriving on the planet. It's just great framing of her against a black background that's sort of got like a gradient over into the side of showing the spaceship. That just looks great, and it conveys everything you need to know about the scene there. Tongpoo flying off on the hover bike. I think it's much better of an angle than one I had issue with previously in Dragon Boy, where Tang Tong was kind of turning the bike around. This one,
right.
It just looks right. It just feels right to me. Everything about very early on in the chapter with Tongpoo's spaceship, just everything in the ship itself and that hysterical machine. I mean, that's what Toriyama loves is maybe he won't admit it and maybe he doesn't want to do all the work, but his technology designs, his robots, they're great.
Even when they're completely implausible, somehow they seem to work.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to point out in this chapter is that the backgrounds are a lot sparser than they were in Dragon Boy. And
that's true, yeah.
Than they are in early Dragon Ball. And I think particularly with the China angle for both Dragon Boy and early Dragon Ball, he and his assistant Takashi Matsuyama put a lot of effort into drawing the backgrounds. And here it's more like they want to concentrate on the characters and the framing and the choreography more so than the backgrounds themselves. Other than being an alien planet, the setting is more or less irrelevant. In fact, in many ways, it's kind of the minimalism that you might see on Planet Namek.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I mean, especially talking about how much water there is on the planet, and we have some cliffs and just this endless expanse of just a planet out there. Not exactly. I feel like we got more clouds here than we do on Namek, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's just how I feel doing a quick look at it. But yeah, it's worth pointing out there.
Yeah. But in that respect, it's a lot cleaner, and I think in that respect, it really shows off Toriyama's increasing proficiency in his action.
Last time on the first part, we talked about where Dragon Boy was republished. I kind of don't want to go through all that again because it's literally all the exact same places. The only difference is with this Bunko release, Julian, this is an Emperor's Feast of Akira Toriyama?
Yes, Toriyama Akira Kanzenshuu.
So the only difference here is that as opposed to being published together, Dragon Boy is in part 1 and Tongpoo is in part 2 of this. Otherwise, all the exact same stuff. The Adventure Special, this was republished in Birdland Press over a series of parts, Blank Piece Theater, and then here, Emperor's Feast. All the same kind of places republished. I'd say let's talk about any references to Tongpoo in interviews, but everything we talk about with Dragon Boy, it's the exact same thing over here. In fact, I would say there's there's only one interview that mentions it explicitly, and it's not even by name. And that's because Toriyama mentions both Weekly Jump and Fresh Jump. And so logically, you can assume he's talking about Dragon Boy and Tongpoo. And we mentioned it last time, and it's just the exact same story over and over and over. It's curious to me that Tongpoo really feels like, again, it is absolutely a prototype for Dragon Ball, and it's not mentioned explicitly by name at all in anything we've translated, as opposed to Dragon Boy, which absolutely is. Why do you think that is?
I think it probably has to do with the fact that apart from the capsules in Tongpoo, the Dragon Boy is superficially much more similar.
Kind of more thematically.
So it looks similar. They're on a journey, and just the visual style seems much more in tune with Dragon Ball. But this one, it feels like he's refining his art and his concepts. So even though the plot and the setting are different, it just feels a lot closer.
Well, with that in mind, again, like we did with Dragon Ball, what do you think the legacy is of Tongpoo here? Does it stand alone as its own enjoyable one-shot? And is it worth revisiting independent from Dragon Ball and in conjunction with Dragon Ball?
Oh, I like it. It's cute. It's got a funny ending. I mean, it's not the kind of open-ended one that you had with Dragon Boy, so it's not like, where's the next one?
Right. Like, clearly they have to go find another planet and they're going to try and get back home. But it's not, we've had a self-contained story and there's still 9/10 of the journey to go. That's not how this one ends.
Right. So it's like riding off into the sunset, except they're flying off into space, and Puramo is not doing so well at the controls.
I think it's definitely worth reading. Every time I reread these, I'm like, oh, I like Dragon Boy. And I'm like, oh, I think Tongpoo is better. And then I'll reread Dragon Boy. No, Dragon Boy is better. I think they both absolutely stand alone. And if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, you owe it to yourself to check these out in any way that you can. Again, we talked about all the re-releases here. So those were the two main prototypes of Dragon Ball. We had Dragon Boy, we had the Adventure of Tongpoo. We will now turn our attention. This is the stuff that I think is just absolutely bonkers and amazing. The true prototypes, as in, this is what I'm drawing to be actual Dragon Ball. He's going to go through three and a half kinds of reworkings of what it's going to be. Julian, let's start at the beginning here. I love this. Toriyama's just going to do Journey to the West, huh?
Pretty much. So you want me to read what he wrote? Or?
Yeah. We have a series of quotes here. We'll talk about this at the end of the episode. In addition to all the new manga guide pages, we have a new translation that's going to be going up. So why don't you read what you have here? Is this the Birdland Press quote?
Yes. So this is from Birdland Press. It's actually from the November 1984 issue.
So Dragon Ball's just getting going, yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same month's issue for his fan club as Dragon Ball is first coming out. So, and he's already telling basically how the idea developed. And so this one's interesting in that these have been borrowed and recapped many times in different guidebooks, but these ones are decidedly from Toriyama's own voice. So I thought it would be good to have him talk about it, write about it rather than having a second or third hand version of it. So let me just read it here. Up to this point in time, I decided that if I were to do a new serial, I was going to do Journey to the West. I think you'll be able to tell just by looking at the characters, but it's more Journey to the West than Dragon Ball. Even Goku is an actual monkey in traditional style. I was planning to make both of the characters and the story faithful to Journey to the West after all. However, the response from my wife and others wasn't all that great, so I thought I'd go ahead and revise the characters.
I guess we have to say what Journey to the West is at this point.
I guess. If you haven't been following the podcast for very long, or if you're just tuning in, so Journey to the West is a tale, a very long novel from 16th century China, traditionally attributed to Wu Chang'an, and it's about the journey of a Buddhist monk, Xuanzang, or Tripitaka, or Sanzo if you prefer, and his several animal companions, Sun Wukong, or Son Goku, the self-styled handsome monkey king and or great sage, equal of heaven, etc., etc., a demonic pig creature, Ju Bacha, or Chohakai, or Pigsy, and sand, or like a water demon, I guess you want to say, which is Shao Wuqing, Shagojo, or Sandy.
And don't forget the horse.
And the horse, who is actually a dragon.
Right. So they're journeying to India to get some sacred scrolls. It's 100 chapters. They kind of go in and out from the chronology of the story itself. You know, we start with the monkey, and then we go back into the monk's history, how he came to be, and then him meeting the Monkey King and them journeying there. If you like Dragon Quest, you will love Journey to the West. It's a series of vignettes. You go from village to village, fight to fight. They're accumulating weapons and knowledge and everything along the way, and hysterical hijinks ensue, and it's a great tale.
The funniest thing about it is that it just goes back and forth between this very, very high register poetic voice, and then it's down and dirty classic slapstick
and then we're
comedy.
peeing in jars.
Yep, and you know, in spite of it having this religious bent in that they're trying to retrieve sutras from India, it's very much a comedy.
You know what I actually want to reference here? If you want to learn more about it, not a whole lot. Jake and I did some Journey to the West primer stuff here on the podcast. I did a special guest appearance on Long Thoughts with Baloo, another podcast where he primarily interviews poets and other performers. I talked about Journey to the West there. So I'll drop links to those additional podcast episodes here in the show notes. So check it out. Now that we've said what Journey to the West is, let's talk about Toriyama's designs here. Everyone's kind of as is except for the monk.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. The quote unquote monk is a girl with a holstered gun and a cowboy hat. So yeah, we're already sort of diverging here. It is interesting to note that traditionally Tripitaka is played by a woman. Mm-hmm. So that is not so far afield as it might seem, but it's interesting that he's definitely sort of diverging from the usual style here. As much as it's a China-esque setting, she's clearly more of a Western, like Old West style than anything else.
All right, so we have the monk who is dressed up as basically a cowboy. Wukong, or rather Son Goku, looks pretty much as is. He's got the adornment on his head. He's got the staff. He's an actual monkey with a tail. He's a little chibi here, but it's Wukong.
Yeah, so it is very much the Journey to the West. As we say, Pache or Pigsy has his rake from the story, so it's still very much Journey to the West as is.
Right. It's not the full group at this point, but you can clearly see Toriyama's going, all right, I'm doing Journey to the West, and here's my take on some of these characters. He didn't get very far, though. Like you said from his quote there, the response wasn't all that great, including from his wife. So he's valuing his wife's opinion quite a bit at this point. Again, Julian, who is Toriyama's wife, he hasn't been married very long at this point, but his wife, she's got the chops to back it up.
Yes. So his wife is her name is Yoshimi, and she went while she was active by the pen name Nachi Mikami. She's from Nagoya originally, and she and Toriyama met, and after about a year they got married in May 1982. So by this point they'd been married for about 2.5 years. Yes, but at this point they were helping each other a lot. In fact, it was his wife who originally had the interest in all these Chinese things and kung fu movies, which she passed on to her husband. We really have his wife to thank.
Yeah, you mentioned that one of his quotes from Dragon Ball was, I think it was the second chapter, "My wife has all this reference material on China, and it's coming in handy." Well, yeah, it sure is, isn't it?
But if she didn't like it, it means that he probably needs to do something else.
Right.
And it's interesting that some of the later material makes it that Torishima didn't like it, and that's possible as well. He's
probably
certainly very strongly opinionated, but probably his wife might have the final say.
I don't know, because Torishima's also said that, I'll let you end Dr. Slump if you do a cool kung fu story, and we get a chance to start something new. He wasn't going to just let him stop Dr. Slump if whatever the next thing was didn't live up to his expectations too. So
that's true.
That takes us to the second draft of this, which is, we have the least on this, because it seems like he got to this point and then this very quickly became the third and a half final draft. But this is the furthest away from its previous incarnation along the way here. We have one really important key piece of artwork. We have clearly same kind of thing, but now we're down to a duo. We're not so much worried about the surrounding characters. We have Son Goku with the staff. The haircut is going to be very familiar to you if you're a Dragon Ball fan. Then we have a female companion here.
So clearly both characters have undergone quite a bit of revision.
Julian, why don't we start with Toriyama's quote here, again from Birdland Press, and we'll go on from there.
Okay. So he says about his second draft, "With that in mind, this is a result of my drawing the characters anew. Having come this far, it was almost Dragon Ball, although even at this point in time, I still hadn't come up with a title. Well, I was busy just coming up with a story, so I didn't have the time to go so far as to think of one. However, I had at least come up with names for the characters. The boy is Son Goku, absolutely. The girl is Pinch. When her name was set as Pinch, it was also around the time that I started thinking of making the work an original story."
So it's curious here. As he's refining the characters, this is also when he's thinking, all right, maybe I'm not going to do Journey to the West as is.
Right. So in very much similar, Goku still has his staff.
But he's not a monkey anymore, and that's kind of like the key difference here.
Yep, and he's already got the Goku hair that he'll become known for.
Yeah.
And he does fly on something, but as in the first draft, it's not a cloud, but like this plane thing. It's actually very similar to, I think, what
what God has in Slump?
The ringside announcer uses in the 21st Tenkai Budokai, and also what God has in Dr. Slump, which came out in February of '84.
How about Pinchy here?
Yep. So she still has the cowboy boots and she still has a gun, but she's been made more feminine. She's wearing a skirt and a blouse instead of a cowboy outfit, and her hair is a bit more, I want to say, Bulma-ish.
Yeah.
Rather than Midori-ish.
This is definitely, again, this is a huge difference in terms of these two character designs. But from what he's saying in the background, like, he definitely wants to do a Journey to the West thing, but it's not going to be that as is. And as he continues to evolve with his characters here, the whole thing just starts to change a little bit.
Right.
And that takes us to the third pass. We kind of have this third pass and third and a half pass along the way, and we'll talk about how and why that is. But Julian, as we get to the third pass here, we are effectively at Dragon Ball.
So we've got Goku and his Dogi. We have him still using the Nyoibo. We've got sketches, which maybe not quite their final designs, but they're recognizable as Oolong, Yamcha, and Puar.
They're real close.
Yep. And you have the girl who is labeled as Pinchy. Her costume has gone from more feminine to maybe a little bit more modern, a little bit
sexy hair,
racier, perhaps. And she's wearing a tube top and pants instead of a skirt and a blouse, but her hair is still similar.
Why don't you give us his quote from the third pass here in Birdland Press?
So he says, "The setting looks Chinese at first glance, but it's actually an entirely fictional locale. The era is all over the place, and I think that's fine. That's because I can draw what I like, and whatever it turns into is fine. In other words, it's anything goes, my specialty. The story is science fiction, adventure comedy, plus love comedy, plus sexy. As far as I'm concerned, love comedies are something that gives me headaches even now. With this, I've lost at least 10 of my precious hairs. P.S. Pinch is now called Buruma. I'll add in something here to show her hair and clothes have changed a bit."
Even at this point, he's drafted some things, but he's even changing those kind of last second here. Not just her name, but also like the most defining characteristic, I'd argue, for Goku himself.
Yeah, even in these late sketches, you don't see a tail. And apparently that's something that Toriyama himself insisted on, is that in spite of everything else being pretty much Dragon Ball at this point, that he felt like the main character just didn't have anything to make him stand out. So he insisted that Toriyama give him something. So he thought back to the origins of the character and said, okay, how about a tail? Finally, everything seemed to gel.
So let's talk a little bit about, he refines this third draft a little bit. A lot of this is coming in from, let's stop there. Let's talk about some of the resources we're pulling a lot of this from. We had the Adventure Special in 1987, which again reprinted both Dragon Boy and Tongpoo, but it also showed some of these drafts, some of the designs, and gave us some commentary on them. We have Kanzenshuu 2, the story guide, which did the exact same thing. Talked about what is it called, Before Dragon Ball. Gave us, again, these designs and some exposition. And then we get Jumping back even further, though, Birdland Press 15, which gives us everything that you're citing Toriyama from here as well. And that's going to be one of the new translations that's going up in full alongside these new manga guide pages. So, Julian, tell me a little bit about kind of draft 3.5 here.
So, draft 3.5. So he's saying that, for example, he didn't want to throw away everything about Journey to the West, so he kept the name Son Goku, which again is the Japanese version of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King.
Right.
And so he wanted to make people think that if you took Journey to the West and arranged it Toriyama style, that it would probably come out like this.
Even he's at this point saying, like, I know what my style is, so if I do my spin on it, this is what this would be. So he's kind of like, what would be people's expectations of me if I did Journey to the West? And
so he's made some minor changes to his sort of pilot manuscript. So actually, the people that are at this point, he was still calling Wulong and Yamcha, which has like a dot in the middle of the names rather than just being Oolong and Yamcha. Mm-hmm. So they're slightly different in the final version from the sketches that are shown. And he talks a little bit about the story, which is very much what we get in the first couple chapters of Dragon Ball in terms of what's going on.
Yeah, you know what? Why don't you actually read these few sentences here? Because I think this is just perfect Toriyama.
So the story. Son Goku lived deep in the mountains all alone with his grandfather, so he knows nothing of the wider world. That's part of the comedy. With the techniques his grandfather trained him in, he's light on his feet and strong. One morning, Budama appears before him. She's a Naui city girl, 2 years older than Goku. She's using her 30 days of summer vacation to go in search of the Dragon Balls. She's a dreamer who wants to use the Dragon Balls, which can grant any wish, to get a wonderful boyfriend. It will be a tale filled with laughs, tears, and adventure with the older, spirited Bulma and the younger, mysterious youth Goku. And, of course, a little bit of that perverted fan service you all like. This is your dream story.
I think it's really telling that Toriyama's talking about the fan service stuff here. There's a couple times he talks about the age of the characters and sex them up a little bit, and he even kind of like throws Torishima under the bus a little bit, saying Torishima wanted it a little sexier.
He always says that. There's the little note that he puts in during the Red Ribbon arc when Dr. Brief porno magazines pop out of the one capsule.
Yeah.
Is a little note that's written in Japanese transliterated into the Latin alphabet that says, I didn't really want to draw this. But he's constantly saying that it's his editor that's encouraging him to do the sexier type stuff. Whether that's true or not is an open question.
Yeah, it's up for debate.
That's what he says.
Yeah. Toriyama here goes on to talk about some of the stuff that we've talked about already, like the bikes and the capsules. Toriyama also mentions the Dragon Radar, but he also mentions the staff here, and maybe you can explain a little bit. We have a note about it in the translation here that'll be going up, but the name of the cloud is a little different.
Yes, so he notes about the Nyoibo is a magnificent staff that extends and retracts freely according to one's will, which is
it's just
very much
the same
thing as from Journey in the West, and it appears along with the Kinton-un, which is how he writes it in Journey to the West. Now, it's important to note that in Journey to the West, there's the equivalent of Kinton, which applies to a technique more so than an object. It's the cloud somersault, which Sun Wukong uses to ride upon the clouds.
Right, he's effectively flying through the skies with it.
And Kinton is the literal transliteration of it. So it's not clear whether Toriyama just was misremembering here or whether he wanted to name it something else.
Well, and the thing here is the Kinton part is written in kana as opposed to the full thing written in kanji. So it's like, I don't know. What do you think his mind frame was here? If he was misremembering it, I feel like, wouldn't you just look it up and write what it is? But this feels very deliberate to me.
Yeah, so it's possible at this point he was planning on naming it slightly differently in order to distinguish it a little bit from Journey to the West, but it's hard to say for sure without something else to confirm that. That
basically brings us to Dragon Ball. At this point, the characters have been redesigned quite a few times. At this point, Draft 3, the even into the final manuscript, the characters have their real names. They look like themselves. Goku has his tail. He's going to be doing a little bit of Journey to the West, but it's going to be a Toriyama-styled version of Journey to the West. It's come a long way. I feel like his drafts for Dragon Ball came a long way, but basically just brought him right back around again to Dragon Boy and Tongpoo.
right? So in many ways, it's like the more it changed, the more it stayed the same.
Yeah.
But you definitely still have the echoes of those earlier drafts as well as the one-shots in the final version. Now, I did mention elsewhere that during the pilot draft stage, he, I think, where was it? I think it was in the Adventure special that they mentioned that he was still planning on 8 Dragon Balls rather than 7. So that was something that got changed for the final draft and continued into the actual version of the story that we all know.
And the reason for that was, well, he was just stealing it, so he changed it.
Right. So he just wanted to make it different. He apparently got the idea from the Hakkenden, which is a long-winded narrative fiction from the Edo period. Was it early 1800s, I want to say? Mm-hmm. About 8 brothers born from a princess and a dog. Don't ask me how. And there's these jewels. But anyway, he turned that into 7. At this point, I think we've pretty much come full circle.
We have.
He does note about some of the other things, about how much he enjoyed designing the number 9 capsule bike and then had it destroyed right away. But he does have another capsule bike that's almost the same in chapter 4 and 5, which they also immediately stop using and doesn't show up again. And then Bulma loses her capsules. So that one doesn't show up for very long either.
I guess at this point, let's talk about what we have going up on the website, because alongside this podcast episode, all this stuff going to be live, everything you can check out. So there's going to be a new section in the manga guide, just called Dragon Ball Prototypes. There's going to be a few pages in there. There's individual pages for each of the, let's say, the 3 chapters. So Dragon Ball 1, Dragon Ball 2, and Tongpoo. And then on the main prototypes page itself, everything, Julian, you and I just talked about, all the Dragon Ball actual prototype drafts along the way, broken down into sections. You can see what some of those designs are. You can see the progression along the way. We've got the quotes from Birdland Press, and then we have in its entirety the Birdland Press translation going up there. And this is just flat out called The Making of Dragon Ball. So it's a pretty good overview. In fact, it starts with a complete overview of all the works that Toriyama was working on along the way and gives you text about the first draft, the second draft, and then into what would become Dragon Ball itself. So glad we could throw this all together. I want to toss out some suggested reading. Of course, anything we link on those pages is probably great. I think the Toriyama on the Road from Landmark, I say recent, but it wasn't so recent anymore at this point. Julian's starting to robot, but we've reached the end of our episode here. So I think that's going to bring it to a close. I've so much enjoyed this, just getting all this documented on the website. And it was me rereading these, and I'm going, man, I just want to cover these. I feel like this needs to be documented, and I got a chance to learn a whole lot more in the process, and that was through reading it and through working with Julian. It's everything I love about Kanzenshuu. Is stuff gives me a reason to enjoy Toriyama's work, and it gives me a reason to learn new things. So I hope we can extend that to all of you reading the website and listening to the podcast here. So www.kanzenshuu.com. That is kanzenshuu.com. We're bringing April to a close here, and I know we didn't get a GT review. We'll be looking to do that in the very near future. We'll be picking up again into the baby arc. Now, the baby is on Earth. Things are actually getting a little exciting over there in that series. So with that, I guess I got to bring it to a close, and since programs and headsets are not cooperating, that actually gives us an opportunity to enjoy Robo Julian once again. Robo Julian, can you please bring this episode to a close?
Thank you for listening to Kanzenshuu, the podcast. Listen again next time. Thank you.